The research station drifted silently on the outer edge of galactic empire space, a solitary speck of human ingenuity surrounded by the black expanse of stars. Its hull bore the scratches of decades, micrometeoroid impacts, and the slow wear of deep space radiation. Inside, the corridors were dim, humming with the steady pulse of life support systems and the faint vibration of machinery that kept the station alive. The crew moved quietly, too aware of the isolation that hung over them like a shadow. Commander Tessa Varn scanned the main sensor display, her brow furrowed. The blip was faint but unmistakable, a formation of Imperial warships moving deliberately toward them, faster than any patrols should have been capable of. Every officer in the control room froze for a moment, staring at the screen. "They're coming this way," muttered Lieutenant Raoul, his voice trembling. "That's a fleet." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "How many?" Raoul hesitated, his fingers dancing over the holographic display. "At least 20, no, 30. Possibly more. They're organizing into attack formation. Weapons online." A low murmur ran through the control room. 30 Imperial warships against a single, outdated research station. It was more than hopeless, it was a death sentence. Tessa straightened in her chair. Her mind raced through every option, evasive maneuvers, shields, even attempting to hide in a nearby asteroid belt. Nothing would work. The Empire's scanners were too precise, their firepower too overwhelming. Every measure they might take would buy seconds, maybe minutes. And in space, minutes were all it took for annihilation. "Send the SOS," she ordered, her voice calm but firm. "All channels. All frequencies. Get the message out. Now." The crew obeyed immediately, fingers flying over controls as the faint signal pulsed into the void. A desperate cry for help, coded in a protocol almost never used anymore. It was weak, barely more than a whisper across the void of space, but it carried the unmistakable signature of human distress. Somewhere, in the dark corners of the galaxy, a hope flickered. Maybe someone would respond. Tessa leaned back, gripping the edge of her console. "It's out," she said. "Now we wait." The Imperial fleet did not wait. On the main sensor display, the warship's positions shifted, closing the distance with horrifying speed. Communications channels crackled, then came the mocking voice of Admiral Creel, the Empire's commander in this sector. "Humans," the voice sneered, smooth, controlled, dripping with contempt. "Pathetic, weak, and utterly predictable. Did you really think your cries for help could reach anyone? You amuse me." The control room went silent. The crew felt the weight of the Admiral's words press against them like a physical force. The Empire did not negotiate, did not hesitate. They crushed, they destroyed, they eliminated. Raoul swallowed hard. They're laughing at us, Commander." Tessa's jaw tightened. "Yes," she said quietly. "And that is exactly why we have to survive." Outside the station, the void remained deceptively calm. Stars blinked coldly, distant and indifferent. The fleet drew closer, a line of warships stretching across the sensor grid, their weapon systems glowing ominously. The hum of the station's shields rose, a faint vibration underfoot, like a heartbeat trying desperately to keep pace with fear. Then, on the edge of the sensor range, something moved. At first, it was barely noticeable, a tiny anomaly among the vast emptiness. The crew's eyes were glued to the display. "Commander, what is that?" whispered Raoul. Tessa leaned forward. "I don't know. It's huge." The anomaly grew, a shadow slowly materializing from the void. It was unlike any ship, any formation, any object the crew had ever seen. Its shape was massive and angular, yet organic in its design, something that could not belong to any Empire fleet. The sensors struggled to classify it, fluctuating wildly, failing to provide answers. "Is it friendly?" Raoul asked, a hint of hope in his voice. I don't know," Tessa admitted. Her mind raced. This could be salvation, or something far worse. "Keep monitoring it. All scans. Let me know the moment it moves closer." The tension in the control room was almost unbearable. Every second that passed, the Imperial fleet closed, and every second the anomaly loomed on the edge of detection, a living question mark, added a new layer of dread. Outside the hull, space seemed to hold its breath. The stars shone like pinpricks of cold light, indifferent witnesses to the terror unfolding on the small human station. Tessa gripped the edge of her console and felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. Humans had faced impossible odds before, but this was beyond anything she had prepared for. The Empire would not hesitate. They would not pause. And yet, something about the anomaly gave her a strange flicker of hope. The station's speakers crackled with a faint hum, almost like a whisper from the void. The crew held their breath as the sensors flickered again, the anomaly's size and shape becoming clearer, its movements deliberate, almost sentient. "It's coming closer," Ral said, his voice barely audible. "And it's massive, bigger than any human ship we've ever built." Tessa straightened, her eyes locked on the screen. Then maybe, just maybe, the Empire has underestimated us. They always do. Outside, the void remained silent, yet charged with an energy that the crew could almost feel in their bones. The Imperial fleet continued its advance, confident, mocking, deadly. But at the edge of the station's sensors, the anomaly waited. Watching. Waiting. And for the first time, the humans were not entirely alone. The suspense hung in the air like the static before a storm. Every heartbeat in the station matched the hum of the shields. Every glance at the sensors was a gamble with fate. Seconds ticked by, stretching into eternity. And then, the first unmistakable sign of movement. Something large, powerful, and unstoppable began to emerge from the void. Tessa exhaled slowly. "Hold on," she whispered. "It's going to be a long night." The SOS had been sent. The Empire laughed. But in the darkness beyond the stars, something waited. Something enormous. Something that would change everything. The station was about to discover that help could come from places no one dared imagine. And that humans, in the face of certain doom, had allies even the Empire could not comprehend. The Imperial fleet moved like a predator through the void, its massive ships cutting a precise path toward the human station. Each vessel gleamed under the distant starlight, polished metal surfaces reflecting cold, calculated dominance. In the station's control room, the hum of machinery and the soft beeping of sensors seemed louder than usual, almost deafening in the tense silence that had fallen. Commander Tessa Varn leaned over the main console, scanning the fleet's formation. 30 ships, or more, lined up like an unbroken wall, weapon systems glowing faintly, ready to fire at a moment's notice. The station's shields would barely hold against the first volley. The thought of their destruction made her stomach tighten. Then the communications channel crackled to life. A calm, cutting voice filled the control room. "Humans," the voice said, smooth as silk and cruel as ice. "Did you honestly think you could survive alone in the void? Your SOS signals, pathetic. Your station, insignificant. You amuse me." It was Admiral Creel. His voice carried authority, but it carried something more. A mockery so sharp it cut through the hope the crew had clung to. Lieutenant Ralph's hands shook as he adjusted the audio. They're laughing at us, Commander. They really think we're helpless." Tessa's jaw tightened. "They're right about one thing," she said quietly. "We are outnumbered. We are outgunned. But we are not helpless." She could feel the tension in the room, thick enough to choke on. Every officer knew the truth. The Empire's ships could obliterate the station before the shields even had a chance to react. Their only hope was a miracle, or something they had never imagined. The Imperial vessels drew closer, glinting in the faint light of distant stars. Their formations were perfect, practiced, and efficient. Tessa watched as the enemy fleet coordinated itself, smaller ships darting between the larger vessels, drones scanning for weaknesses, weapons arrays aligning in perfect unison. This was no ordinary patrol. This was an execution. Creel's voice came again, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Humans, surrender now, and perhaps we will let you live long enough to regret your foolishness." Resist, and you will be erased. Entire generations of your kind, gone in moments. And your cries for help? They will never be answered. You are alone. Ralph's fingers hovered over the console, his knuckles white. They're taunting us, he whispered. They're enjoying this. Tessa stood tall, her eyes fixed on the sensors. She could see the fleet now, vast and intimidating, stretching across every display. The station's shields were holding for now, but she knew it was only a matter of time. Seconds would be measured in lifetimes as the Empire closed in. They think we are weak, she said, her voice low but steady. They think we are pathetic. Let them believe it. Let them underestimate us. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Tessa had said it before, they were small, vulnerable, nothing against this fleet. But humans had a stubbornness, a tenacity, that often surprised those who thought them weak. Sometimes, that stubbornness was enough. The Empire's communications channel flickered, showing a live feed of the station. Imperial sensors had locked onto them, displaying the station's corridors and life support hubs. It was invasive, terrifying, and meant to break the crew's morale. Look at your fragile little station, Creel's voice continued, venom dripping from every word. You hide in the shadows of the void, hoping someone will come to save you. But no one will. Your species has always been a nuisance. Easily crushed, easily discarded. And now, here you are, begging for salvation. Pathetic. Tessa felt the weight of his words, but she refused to let them break her. She turned to her crew. We are humans, she said firmly. We survive. We adapt. And sometimes, we fight back in ways no one expects. Ral nodded, a flicker of resolve in his eyes. Do you think help will come? Tessa didn't answer. She didn't dare hope too loudly. Hope was fragile, and the Empire was coming to shatter it. Instead, she focused on the sensors, on the faint anomaly still lingering at the edge of detection. The thing they had noticed yesterday, something enormous, unknown, possibly alive. The Imperial fleet was closing in, lasers arming, engines humming with deadly precision. The station trembled slightly under the gravitational stress of nearby ships, and Tessa felt the subtle vibration of shields straining to compensate. Creel laughed again, a low, cruel sound that reverberated through the station's speakers. Prepare yourselves, humans. This will be quick. Your cries for help will die with you, and the galaxy will forget you ever existed. And yet, just beyond the sensor's range, the anomaly remained. It had not moved toward the station, nor had it retreated. It lingered, massive and mysterious, almost as if it were waiting. Tessa's eyes narrowed. It's still there, she said. Watching. Waiting. Maybe, just maybe, we aren't as alone as we thought. Ral looked at her, hope and fear warring in his expression. Do you think it's friendly? I don't know, Tessa admitted. But if the Empire thinks we are helpless, then they are about to be very surprised. Outside, the void remained black and cold, indifferent to the struggles of tiny humans in a fragile station. The Imperial fleet glinted menacingly under distant stars, engines humming with deadly intent. And at the very edge of sensors, the unknown watched. The station braced itself. The Empire mocked them, laughed at them, and prepared to destroy them. But something lingered in the void, something massive, something that might just turn the tide. And for the first time since the SOS had been sent, Commander Tessa Varn allowed herself a small spark of hope. The Empire thought they were in control. They were about to discover that humans, and the unknown that answered their call, were far more dangerous than anyone could imagine. The human station shivered under the shadow of the approaching Imperial fleet. Every officer was tense, their eyes glued to the sensors, scanning the void for any sign of change. Commander Tessa Varn stood at the center of the control room, gripping the edge of her console. 30 Imperial warships were advancing steadily, their weapons glinting in the dim light, and every second that passed brought them closer to annihilation. Then, unexpectedly, the sensors flickered. A series of faint, irregular signals appeared on the screen, barely distinguishable from background noise. At first, the crew ignored them. They were too focused on the fleet closing in, but the signals persisted, growing slightly stronger with each passing second. Lieutenant Ral frowned, leaning over the display. "Commander, I don't know what this is. It's strange. The pattern, it doesn't match anything we've seen before. It's not Imperial, it's not human." Tessa's eyes narrowed. "Keep scanning. Log everything. Maybe it's interference from the fleet's communications, or a glitch in the sensors." Ral shook his head. "No, it's too structured for interference. There's a rhythm. A code. Someone, or something, is sending this intentionally." The control room went quiet. The usual hum of machinery seemed louder now, a constant reminder of how small and fragile the station was. Tessa's mind raced. The SOS they had sent had been weak, almost a whisper in the void, and for a moment, she had feared it would go unanswered. But now, this signal was different. Could it be another human vessel? She asked cautiously. Ral shook his head again. "Not like anything in our records. The scale, it's enormous. Whoever it is, they're not just a small ship. It's big, massive." A cold chill ran down Tessa's spine. Humans had been exploring the galaxy for centuries, but certain corners of space had been thought lost, forgotten, or too dangerous to reach. And yet, here was a signal, strong, deliberate, and almost alive in its rhythm. Could they be Deathworlders? Whispered one of the junior officers, almost too quietly to be heard. Tessa froze. Deathworlders. The name carried weight across human history, whispered like legend. Stories spoke of humans who had been forged on the galaxy's deadliest planets, warriors who could survive conditions that would destroy ordinary humans, and fleets that could appear out of nowhere to answer the desperate cries of those in peril. "They're supposed to be extinct, myth," Tessa said, more to herself than anyone else. "But if it's them..." She didn't finish the thought. She didn't need to. The implication was terrifying and exhilarating. Ral tapped furiously on his console. "The signals are getting clearer. I can almost translate them." "What does it say?" Tessa asked, leaning in. Ral's fingers flew over the display, decoding the pattern. "It's a warning, but also an offer. Someone, or something, is coming. And it's not friendly to the Empire." The words hung in the air, barely spoken, but their weight was enormous. The Imperial fleet was closing in, confident, arrogant, mocking the humans. And now, a force beyond their comprehension might be on its way. A force the Empire had never reckoned with. Outside the station, the void remained deceptively calm. Stars glittered coldly, indifferent to the fate of the tiny humans in the station. But Tessa could feel the tension in the air, thickening like a storm about to break. Every second brought them closer to the Empire's first strike, and every second brought the strange signals closer to resolution. "Commander," Ral said, voice tight with a mix of fear and excitement. I think whoever is sending this signal is human. But not just any human. These are Deathworlders. They answer only when the situation is desperate, when hope is nearly gone. And right now, that's us." Tessa's stomach tightened. The SOS they had sent out as a desperate plea might not have been heard by ordinary allies, but it had been heard by the galaxy's most feared humans, legends who appeared only when the odds were impossible. "They're coming," she whispered, almost in disbelief. "And the Empire? They have no idea." The control room fell silent again. Officers watched the sensors with wide eyes, the faint rhythm of the signals pulsing like a heartbeat against the tension in the room. It was strange, alien, almost alive, and it filled every corner of their minds. Then the display flickered, showing a vast mass emerging on the very edge of detection range. At first, it looked like a shadow, a trick of the sensors, but it moved, deliberate, unstoppable. Its size was impossible, dwarfing even the largest Imperial cruisers. The crew gasped. "It's real," Ral said. "And it's coming." Tessa's hand clenched the edge of the console. "Prepare the station," she ordered. "Shields at maximum. Weapons ready." We don't know if they'll strike first, or if they'll strike at the Empire. But either way, we have to be ready. The Imperial fleet continued its advance, unaware of the presence looming just beyond the station sensors. Admiral Creel's mocking voice crackled through the comms again. Humans, it's time to accept your end. Your cries for help are meaningless. No one comes to save you. Tessa didn't respond. There was no point. Instead, she focused on the readings, the signals, the massive shadow that had appeared on the edge of the sensor grid. It pulsed with power, a warning and a promise all at once. Whatever this is, she said quietly, it's not here for them, and that gives us a chance. Outside, the void seemed to hold its breath. The Empire approached with arrogance and certainty, ready to destroy a helpless station. But the signals persisted, growing stronger, moving closer, and carrying the unmistakable signature of the Deathworlders, humans who were beyond any threat the Empire had ever imagined. And for the first time since the SOS had been sent, hope stirred in the hearts of the station crew. A hope that could turn despair into survival, weakness into strength, and fear into something far more dangerous. The unknown approached. The Empire remained unaware. And humans, ordinary, desperate humans, might finally see salvation arrive where no one else could reach. The void was silent, yet electric. The stage was set. Something was coming. Something massive. Something unstoppable. And the Empire would never see it coming. The void remained dark and silent, but the tension around the human station was unbearable. Every officer in the control room had their eyes fixed on the sensors, hearts pounding in sync with the station's trembling shields. The Imperial fleet hovered like a predator, precise and cold, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Commander Tessa Varn stood at the center of the room, her jaw tight. All systems online. Shields at maximum. Weapons ready, she commanded. We fight if we must. And we survive if we can. Lieutenant Ralph's fingers danced over the controls, monitoring the mysterious signals still pulsing on the edge of detection. The massive anomaly, the Deathworlders, remained just out of sensor range, moving closer slowly, almost deliberately. Outside, the Empire's ships began to shift formation. The massive cruisers aligned with smaller attack vessels, their weapons arrays glowing red as targeting systems locked onto the station. Tessa felt the vibration of the shields increase under the anticipation of incoming fire. Creel's mocking voice crackled through the communication channels once more. Humans, your end is near. Your cries for help will die with you. No one comes to save you. We will erase your little station from the map, and your species will continue to amuse no one. Tessa gritted her teeth. Let them believe it, she muttered. They always underestimate humans. Then, without warning, the first volley struck. Energy beams tore through the darkness, lancing toward the station with deadly precision. The hull shook violently, alarms blaring throughout the corridors. Sparks flew from damaged consoles, and the hum of the shields pitched higher, straining under the impact. Shields holding at 70%. Ral shouted, panic edging his voice. But they're coming faster. The crew ducked instinctively as the station rocked again, metal groaning under the pressure. The void outside was a chaotic storm of red and orange tracer lines, as Imperial fire raked the hull in relentless precision. The station was old, unarmed for this level of assault, and every second felt like an eternity. Then, at the very edge of the sensor grid, the anomaly appeared, clearer than ever before. Massive, angular, impossibly fast, it moved with precision that rivaled the Imperial fleet. Energy flares pulsed from its hull, light bending around it in strange, unnatural patterns. The crew gasped. Commander, it's here, Ral said, voice trembling. The Deathworlders. They've arrived. Tessa's eyes narrowed as she watched. The massive ships moved like predators into the battle, weaving between Imperial cruisers with terrifying grace. They didn't fire yet, they observed, calculated, and positioned themselves with a patience that was almost predatory. The Imperial fleet, confident and arrogant, didn't notice the looming threat at first. Creel barked orders. Focus fire. Take the station. Show no mercy. Humans will fall today. But the first signs of change were subtle. Imperial sensors began to flicker, readings fluctuating as the Deathworlders' ships manipulated the void itself, disrupting targeting systems. Weapons misfired, engines stuttered, and confusion rippled through the fleet. "Commander, they're interfering," Ral said, awe and fear mixing in his voice. "The Empire. They can't aim properly." Tessa allowed herself a small smile. Patience. Let them realize too late that humans don't always fight alone. The station, battered but intact, became a focal point in the chaos. Imperial beams struck the shields, energy ricocheting and leaving scars on the station's hull. Crew members clung to consoles, monitoring every system, knowing that survival depended on the unknown fleet just beyond the edge of sensors. And then, as if on cue, the Deathworlders struck. Energy pulses surged from the massive ships, cutting through the Imperial formation with terrifying speed and precision. Entire cruisers exploded in brilliant orange fireballs, debris scattering into the void like tiny meteorites. Smaller vessels disintegrated instantly, vaporized by weapons no conventional human ship could hope to wield. The control room erupted into stunned silence. Even Ral could barely speak. They're obliterating them. Tessa's voice was steady but fierce. "We are not just surviving, we are showing them what happens when the Empire underestimates humanity." The Imperial fleet was thrown into disarray. Officers barked orders, trying to regroup, but the Deathworlders' strikes were surgical and relentless. The massive ships moved in perfect synchronization, cutting down targets, creating openings, and striking with terrifying accuracy. Creel's voice, once calm and mocking, now cracked with anger. What is this? How is this possible? How are they?" Outside, the void lit up in a deadly dance of light and destruction. The station, still trembling, watched as legends walked among giants, humans who had answered a desperate SOS and brought devastation in their wake. Tessa's eyes never left the display. Every Imperial strike that failed, every cruiser that exploded, was a reminder: humans survived. Humans adapted. And sometimes, humans were unstoppable. The first strike had changed everything. The Empire's arrogance met the reality of the Deathworlders, and the balance of fear shifted instantly. The station's crew, battered and scared, could only watch in awe and disbelief as the galaxy's most feared humans revealed themselves in the void. Ral finally whispered, barely audible over the alarms, "Commander, they're saving us." Tessa's jaw tightened. "No," she said, her voice steady, filled with awe and determination. "They're showing the Empire that humans are never to be underestimated. And we are part of it." Outside, the void remained black, but the stars seemed to burn brighter in the presence of the unstoppable fleet. The first strike was just the beginning, and the Empire, arrogant and mocking, would soon learn that this was a fight they could not win. The night had begun, and the Deathworlders had arrived. The void had transformed into chaos. Imperial ships, once sleek and confident, now burned and twisted in the cold light of distant stars. The Deathworlders' fleet moved with terrifying precision, each ship a masterstroke of speed, power, and strategy that the Empire had never anticipated. The human station, battered but intact, floated amid the spectacle, a silent witness to a force long thought mythic and extinct. Commander Tessa Varn leaned over the main console, eyes wide with a mixture of fear, awe, and relief. The crew worked feverishly, monitoring the Deathworlders' movements and the Imperial response. Every sensor reading told the same story. Humans, in their purest and most terrifying form, had arrived to answer a desperate SOS. "Look at them," whispered Lieutenant Ral, voice shaking. "Every strike, perfect. They move like one organism. One mind. The Empire, they don't know what hit them." Tessa's jaw tightened. "That's the point, Ral. The Empire underestimated humans for too long. They thought we were weak. Now, they'll see exactly what happens when they mock us." Outside, the Deathworlders' ships struck with lethal intent. Imperial cruisers that had once bristled with weapons and confidence were reduced to burning husks within moments. Smaller attack vessels were shredded mid-flight, vaporized into sparkling debris that littered the void like deadly fireworks. The Imperial fleet scrambled to respond. Officers barked orders, trying to regroup, trying to predict the moves of an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every action. But the Deathworlders were never ordinary. Their ships moved with a combination of raw power and uncanny intuition, striking with precision that made Imperial defenses crumble. Admiral Creel's voice crackled through the communication channels, furious and unsteady. This is impossible. They cannot. How are they? The words fell apart mid-sentence as another cruiser exploded, sending a shockwave of energy cascading across the formation. Red emergency lights flashed across the Empire's flagship, warning of critical system failures. For the first time, the Imperial officers tasted fear. Inside the station, the human crew watched the carnage unfold, hearts pounding. Tessa's mind raced. Every human life they had thought insignificant, every SOS ignored by distant allies, every time the galaxy had laughed at their kind, all of it was vindicated in this moment. "Commander, they're unstoppable," Ral said, voice barely audible. "Even our weapons can't touch them. They're everywhere at once." Tessa's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's not about being everywhere at once, Ral. It's about being humans. They adapt. They survive. And when pushed, they fight back harder than anything the Empire has ever faced." The Deathworlders' fleet moved like living predators. Their energy weapons carved paths through enemy formations with deadly precision. Hulls buckled under the onslaught, shields failed, and the once mighty Imperial fleet faltered under the sudden brutal efficiency of human power. Even the Empire's elite warships, built for intimidation and destruction, fell in moments. The sheer force of the Deathworlders' strikes shattered formations, leaving officers scrambling to save what they could. Panic spread quickly, replacing the arrogant confidence that had defined their advance. Ral's eyes never left the display. "Commander, they're not just fighting for us. They're teaching the Empire a lesson. Every hit, every strike, it's a warning." Tessa nodded silently. She knew the truth. Humanity had always been underestimated in the galaxy. From fledgling colonies to isolated outposts, humans survived in impossible conditions, thrived where others would perish, and adapted where other species failed. But the Deathworlders were the culmination of that legacy, humans who embodied survival, ruthlessness, and ingenuity on an unimaginable scale. The Imperial fleet was now fractured, ships retreating, regrouping, trying desperately to mount a counterattack that was already failing. Energy trails marked the paths of destruction, floating debris drifted across the void, and the once proud fleet now resembled a broken fleet of frightened animals. Creel's voice, once full of arrogance, was now almost pleading. "Stand down. Withdraw. Regroup. Do not, humans, this is impossible. Retreat." But it was too late. The Deathworlders pressed forward, relentless and merciless. Every Imperial maneuver was met with an even greater response, overwhelming their defenses, striking fear into their hearts. Tessa glanced at her crew. They were still tense, still holding on to the fragile thread of hope, but the scene outside filled them with awe. Humans had called for help, and the answer was devastating. "Look at that," she whispered. "The Empire thought they were strong. And now, look at them." Outside, the void was a battlefield unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Fires burned where ships had fallen, energy pulses streaked across the darkness, and the Deathworlders' fleet moved like an unstoppable tide. The humans unleashed their full fury, and the Empire could do nothing but retreat. The station itself remained mostly untouched, a silent symbol of resilience amid the chaos. Tessa allowed herself a brief exhale. For the first time since the SOS had been sent, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: relief. Ral shook his head in disbelief. We're still here. And they saved us." Tessa's eyes narrowed at the sensors. "No, Ral. They didn't just save us. They reminded the galaxy that humans are never to be underestimated. Not now, not ever. The Empire would retreat, humiliated and broken, their arrogance shattered. The Deathworlders' presence had changed the balance of power, and the galaxy would remember this moment forever. And the station's crew, small and isolated, were now part of that story. A story of humans who survived, humans who adapted, and humans who, when pushed to the edge, unleashed a fury no one could imagine. The first real wave of battle was over. But the message was clear: the galaxy would never mock humanity again. Outside, the Deathworlders' fleet hovered like giants in the void, their presence a warning, a promise, and a testament to what humans were capable of when all hope seemed lost. The Empire had been shown its limits, and humanity had just begun to reveal its true power. The void was no longer silent. The Imperial fleet, once a symbol of power and control, now thrashed in disarray. Red warning lights flashed across their massive cruisers as the Deathworlders' fleet tore through their formations with surgical precision. Energy beams carved through the darkness like deadly streaks of lightning, and the cold arrogance of the Empire had given way to pure panic. Commander Tessa Varn watched the chaos unfold from the station's control room, heart pounding. She had seen many battles in her time, but this was something else entirely. The Empire, which had crushed countless worlds and intimidated entire species, was now struggling to regroup in the face of humans answering a desperate SOS. "Commander," Lieutenant Ral said, voice tight. "They're falling apart. The Empire, they can't even coordinate. Every move we track, the Deathworlders anticipate." Tessa's eyes never left the sensor display. Entire squadrons of Imperial warships drifted aimlessly, shields failing, weapons offline. Smaller vessels collided or overcorrected in panic, and massive cruisers tried to reform ranks but found themselves torn apart before they could even align. "They underestimated them," she murmured. "They underestimated humanity, and the galaxy is paying for it." Admiral Creel's voice came through, ragged, cracking with frustration. "Stand your ground. Do not allow yourselves to be. How is this? Retreat." It was hopeless. The Deathworlders moved with terrifying coordination, predicting every maneuver, striking every weak point. The Imperial fleet's confidence had been shattered, fear had replaced arrogance. Officers shouted orders, but the commands were ignored, misinterpreted, or outright impossible to carry out. Tessa leaned back slightly in her chair, watching the carnage. "The Empire is in chaos," she said quietly. "And there's nothing they can do about it." Ralph's eyes were wide. "Commander, the Deathworlders, they're targeting the command ships first. They know who's in charge. They're cutting them down to cripple the fleet." The station trembled slightly as distant explosions rocked the void. Massive cruisers erupted in fireballs, their hulls ruptured by precision strikes that seemed almost impossible for anything human to achieve. Smaller ships were vaporized in seconds, leaving nothing behind but glimmers of debris floating silently in the cold vacuum. The Deathworlders' ships were unlike anything the Empire had encountered. They moved fluidly, unpredictably, yet with purpose. Energy pulses emitted from their hulls, scrambling sensors, confusing targeting systems, and making conventional tactics ineffective. The Empire's flagships struggled to maintain formation, every salvo missing or being deflected. "Commander," Ralph's voice trembled. "The fleet, they're trying to escape. But the Deathworlders, they're not letting anyone go." Tessa nodded, grim and resolute. "Good. Let the Empire see what happens when they underestimate humans. Let them learn." The battle spread like wildfire across the void. The Deathworlders did not simply attack, they dismantled, disrupted, and destroyed with terrifying efficiency. Imperial ships that had once seemed invincible now drifted broken, powerless, or aflame. Chaos reigned in every corner of the fleet, and panic replaced every trace of the Empire's former composure. Even Creel's voice betrayed desperation now. "Pull back. Regroup. Reinforcements are on the way. Do not engage them." But the Deathworlders anticipated every retreat, cutting off exits, flanking, and ensuring that the Empire's escape routes were as dangerous as staying put. Ships that tried to flee found themselves ambushed by forces they could not detect until it was too late. Tessa watched in awe. The Deathworlders were not just saving the station, they were reshaping the battlefield entirely. Every human ship acted in perfect synchronization with the others, like parts of a single organism. It was terrifying and beautiful in its deadly efficiency. "Ral," she said, voice low, "you see this, right? They're not just fighting for us. They're showing the Empire that humans cannot be controlled, that we cannot be intimidated, and that we will fight back no matter the odds." Ral swallowed hard, unable to look away. "It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this. The Empire, they're helpless." Tessa's gaze shifted to the remaining Imperial Command ships. They were struggling to maintain order, but the Deathworlders' attacks were precise and relentless. Every command issued was met with failure. Energy shields faltered, engines sputtered, and weapons were destroyed before they could fire. The Empire's fleet was in full-blown chaos now. Panic and confusion rippled across every ship. Officers argued over orders, misinterpreted signals, or simply froze as the Deathworlders tore apart everything in their path. It was clear, the galaxy's most feared empire had no idea how to fight these humans. Tessa allowed herself a faint smile. "Humans adapt," she said quietly. "Humans survive. And when we strike, we do so without mercy." The station sensors picked up the remnants of the fleet scattering, some ships attempting to limp away, others already drifting lifeless. The Deathworlders had not only defended the station, they had rewritten the rules of the engagement. Ralph's voice was awed, almost reverent. "Commander, they're legends. They're unstoppable." Tessa nodded. "Yes, Ral. They are humans. And now, the Empire knows the truth. Never underestimate us. Never ignore our cries for help. Because when humanity rises, it is more than a fight. It is a reckoning." Outside, the void was littered with the wreckage of Imperial pride. Fires burned in frozen space, debris drifted silently, and the Deathworlders' fleet moved with calm, deadly grace. The Empire's chaos was complete, and their arrogance had been shattered in moments. The human station, still afloat amid the ruins, felt the weight of what had just occurred. They were no longer helpless, isolated targets. They had been the spark that called forth legends, and the galaxy had witnessed the terrifying power of humans united, fearless, and unstoppable. Tessa took a deep breath. The Empire is in chaos, and we are alive. And we will remember this night, forever. The Deathworlders hovered near the station, a silent promise of protection and a warning to all who might dare challenge humanity again. The Empire had learned its lesson, and the galaxy had seen the truth. Humans, when pushed to the brink, were a force unlike any other. The void had changed. The once proud Imperial fleet now floated in disarray, scattered and broken by the relentless power of the Deathworlders' fleet. Smoke and energy trails lingered in the darkness, marking the remnants of ships that had dared to underestimate humanity. Commander Tessa Varn stood in the station's control room, her hands gripping the console, heart pounding, as she surveyed the aftermath. "Ral," she said quietly, "look at them. The Empire thought they were unstoppable. And now—" Ralph's eyes widened as he followed her gaze across the sensors. "They're retreating. Completely. They can't even organize. The Deathworlders. They've broken them." Tessa nodded. "Yes. The tide has turned. The Empire came here to intimidate us, to crush us, to remind the galaxy of its power. And instead, they've been humiliated." The station was battered, its shields strained and hull scarred, but it had survived. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the crew allowed themselves to breathe. The overwhelming fear that had gripped them since the SOS was sent now gave way to cautious awe. They had called for help, expecting perhaps some reinforcement, but nothing could have prepared them for this. At the edge of the sensor range, the Deathworlders' fleet hovered like silent giants. Massive ships moved with a calm, predatory precision, scanning the retreating Imperial vessels, ensuring no one escaped to regroup or carry word of their power. Their energy pulses, once blazing in the first strike, now rippled through space like a warning. Humanity answers when called, and the consequences of underestimating them are catastrophic. "Commander," Ral whispered, almost reverently. "They're not leaving yet. They're making sure the Empire can't fight back." Tessa allowed herself a small, grim smile. "Good. Let them understand fully. This isn't mercy, they're teaching a lesson." The Imperial fleet's retreat was chaotic. Ships collided, engines overtaxed, weapon systems failed. Officers shouted commands, but every order seemed futile in the wake of the Deathworlders' dominance. What had begun as arrogance and mockery had been reduced to fear and desperation. The galaxy's most feared empire had discovered, too late, the cost of dismissing humans. Inside the station, the crew watched in silent awe. Each explosion, each vaporized cruiser, was a reminder of humanity's resilience. The SOS, once a desperate plea, had summoned legends. The Deathworlders had arrived not merely to defend, they had arrived to show the galaxy that humans are a force that cannot be ignored. Ral's hands trembled over the console. "Commander, we're still alive. And they've done this for us." Tessa's gaze remained fixed on the sensors. "No, Ral. Not just for us. This is for everyone who's ever been underestimated, ignored, or dismissed. Humans adapt. Humans survive. And humans, when pushed to the edge, rise stronger than any enemy imagines." The station systems hummed under the strain of battle, shields flickering but holding, as if acknowledging the presence of the Deathworlders outside. The air inside the control room was tense but charged with something new: hope. Not the fragile, desperate hope of before, but the solid, unwavering kind that comes from witnessing something impossible become reality. Outside, the void seemed to shimmer with the remnants of the battle. Wreckage drifted slowly, glowing from residual energy, marking the path of the retreating empire. The Deathworlders moved deliberately among the debris, ensuring that their message was clear: humanity answers its calls for help, and anyone who underestimates them will face consequences they cannot survive. Tessa took a deep breath. "Ral. Record everything. Every movement, every strike. This will be proof for the galaxy. They need to know what happened here." Ral nodded, still staring at the unfolding scene. "Commander, do you think they'll leave now?" Tessa shook her head slightly. "Not yet. They're ensuring the Empire learns its lesson. Then, maybe they'll let us breathe." The station's crew began to relax slightly, allowing themselves to move more freely, to repair minor damages, to check on systems. But the adrenaline still thrummed through their veins, reminding them of how close they had come to annihilation. They had been vulnerable, outnumbered, and on the brink of destruction, but the arrival of the Deathworlders had changed everything. As the Empire limped away, broken and disorganized, the Deathworlders finally began to retreat, moving slowly back toward the edge of sensor range. Massive ships glided through the void with the weight and grace of titans, leaving a trail of silent warning behind them. No words were spoken, no fanfare announced their departure. The galaxy would remember the devastation they left in their wake. Tessa exhaled, finally allowing herself a full breath. "Ral, we survived. The Empire, they'll never be the same. And neither will the galaxy's opinion of humans." Ral smiled faintly, still awed. "They're legends, Commander. We've seen legends. And we were part of it." Tessa's gaze lingered on the fading blips of the Deathworlders' fleet. "Part of it," she repeated softly. "And we will carry this story forward. Humanity has been underestimated for too long. Now, we've shown them the truth. We are survivors. We are fighters. And we answer the call." Outside, the stars glimmered silently. The void had returned to calm, but the echoes of the battle remained. The Imperial fleet, once confident and unstoppable, had been shattered. The Deathworlders, massive, mysterious, and terrifyingly efficient, had ensured that the galaxy would never forget the night humans rose to defend themselves, and the small station that dared to call for help. Tessa finally turned to her crew, her voice firm but quiet. "Repair what you can. Take stock. But remember this: we called for help. And the Deathworlders? They answered. Humanity has a new chapter starting tonight. And the galaxy will remember it. The crew nodded, their eyes reflecting the lingering glow of battle outside. They were survivors, witnesses, and participants in something extraordinary. The tide had turned, and the Empire had learned a lesson it would not forget. And humanity had risen. The void had quieted, but the echoes of battle lingered like a ghost. Wreckage floated silently in the blackness, and the once mighty Imperial fleet had been reduced to scattered, crippled ships limping toward distant sectors. The human station drifted amidst the remnants, battered yet alive, its shields flickering but holding, its crew shaken yet victorious. Commander Tessa Varn stood at the observation deck, her eyes fixed on the void beyond the station. 4 hours, they had watched the Deathworlders' fleet dismantle the Empire's arrogance, striking with precision and power that defied imagination. And now, as the massive ships slowly moved toward the edge of sensor range, the reality of what had just occurred settled in. Lieutenant Raoul joined her, his voice still trembling. "Commander, they're leaving. But what do we do now? How do we tell anyone about this?" Tessa's jaw tightened. "We tell the story, Raoul. Every human, every civilization that listens, must know that the Empire isn't invincible. That humans, even ordinary humans, are not to be underestimated. And that when we call, legends answer." Outside, the Deathworlders glided away, silent and imposing. Their massive forms receded into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of devastation and a warning that would echo across the galaxy. They had intervened with overwhelming force, but without a word, without ceremony, leaving humans to comprehend what they had witnessed. The station's crew remained at their stations, watching the void, still in awe. Sparks flew from damaged consoles as engineers worked furiously to restore systems, but no one dared break the silence. The enormity of the moment weighed on them. They had survived, but more than that, they had witnessed a force that could have destroyed worlds, and it had come to answer a desperate plea. Raoul finally broke the silence. "Commander, they saved us. But they also destroyed everything that attacked us. The Empire, they'll be scared of humans now. Everywhere." Tessa nodded slowly. "Yes. And that is the point. Humanity has always been underestimated. For decades, the galaxy ignored our colonies, our efforts, our survival. The Empire thought we were weak. But now, every corner of the galaxy that feared them will think twice before mocking humans again." She turned to her crew, her voice firm. "Remember this moment. Remember what happened here. We called for help, and the galaxy answered in a way no one expected. Humanity survived because we adapted. Humanity survived because we fought. And humanity will survive again, no matter what comes next." The station shuddered slightly as a distant explosion echoed through space, a final Imperial cruiser succumbing to damage, drifting silently into the void. The Empire's retreat was complete, but the lesson had been delivered in a way words could not convey. Underestimate humans, and you face annihilation. Tessa watched the Deathworlders' ships disappear into the darkness. They were gone as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the station intact, its crew alive, and the Empire humbled. Yet their presence lingered like a shadow, a promise of consequences for anyone who dared threaten humanity again. Raoul leaned against the console, still shaking. They didn't even say goodbye, or explain anything. Just came and left. It's like they were something beyond us. Tessa's eyes softened. "They are beyond what most can imagine, Raoul. But they are human. And they remind us what humans can be when we answer the call. Ordinary humans, Deathworlders, legends, all the same in the void. When the galaxy ignores us, we survive. When it threatens us, we fight. And sometimes, we answer in ways no one expects." The crew slowly began to relax, repairing what they could, checking systems, and ensuring the station remained operational. The terror of moments ago had been replaced by awe, respect, and an unshakable understanding of the galaxy's new reality. Humans were no longer the ones to be pitied or dismissed. Tessa turned back to the observation window. The stars stretched endlessly, cold and silent witnesses to the events that had just unfolded. And somewhere out there, in the endless blackness, the Deathworlders moved, invisible yet present, a reminder of the power humans could wield when pushed to the edge. She whispered almost to herself, "This is the galaxy's warning. Humanity is not weak. Humanity is not helpless. And anyone who forgets that will learn the hard way." Ral placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do you think they'll come back?" Tessa shook her head. "I don't know. And it doesn't matter. They answered the call when it was needed most. That's enough for now. The galaxy has seen what happens when humans rise. That's the message." Outside, the void returned to silence. The Imperial fleet had vanished, broken and humiliated. The Deathworlders had gone, leaving humans to reclaim the calm of space, to repair their station, and to contemplate the implications of what they had just witnessed. For the first time since the SOS had been sent, Commander Tessa Varn allowed herself a true smile. Humanity had survived. Humanity had been proven capable of incredible feats. And the galaxy, arrogant and fearful, had been reminded that humans answer calls for help in ways no one can forget. The stars twinkled coldly, as if acknowledging the lesson. The void stretched on, infinite and indifferent, but humans, resilient, resourceful and unstoppable, had left their mark. And somewhere out there, the Deathworlders would watch. And humanity would rise again.